From cleaning the riverside, let's segue to cleaning the things in our home. Because in this week's Hot Button, Tim and Asma talk about the things we keep or hoard.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hot Button. This week we're going to discuss hoarding, or more accurately, what is considered clutter and what is actually valuable. I, for one, try and purge my house as much as possible because I hate mess, and mess equals stress. What about you, Asma?
I think for me it depends on what the object actually is. I can be quite ruthless when it comes to anything that's on paper. Once I have an electronic copy, out goes the physical version of it.
Are there things that you keep?
Oh, for sure. There are some things I've had over the years that I don't actually need per se, but I wouldn't dream of getting rid of them. Most of these have emotional value as opposed to physical value. For instance, I've kept all of the birthday cards that I've ever received from way back when. It's not so much about the thing itself as it is about who it's from and what it symbolizes. But I do have a hard time deciding between what stays and what goes. How do you figure out what you would keep and what you wouldn't?
A general rule I like to stick with is to decide based on the size of the item. So I like that you keep your birthday cards. They don't take up a lot of space and they have a lot of sentimental value, and you can enjoy that later on. But what if it takes up a lot of space? Like the old china cabinet that's in my bedroom, which I have no idea what to do with. Some things are just really difficult to repurpose in your home.
I think for me that's when the practicality kicks in. And I would most likely either donate it or sell it off, even if it does have meaning for me.
What about a garage sale?
I've actually never had one, We always lived in a condo, so there never really was a garage to have a sale out of.
So I guess you were forced to be pickier with what you kept and threw away because of the space of your home. For me, I grew up in a 5-bedroom home, so my parents always found space somewhere to cram something.
So what you're saying is, the more space you have, the more stuff you will find to fill it up with. Isn't it interesting though that a lot of the things that we buy, we end up only using a few times before they're doomed to the attic or to the storage room, never to see daylight again?
That's a good point. I definitely buy things thinking they're going to be more useful down the road than they actually are. I recently bought a toy for my pet chinchilla, thinking he would love it. He didn't, so now the question is, do I throw it out or hope he changes his mind?
Well, for your sake, I hope your pet chinchilla grows to like this toy that you refuse to get rid of. I find that when I'm cleaning my house, I'll find things that I didn't even remember I had, and of course that will totally distract me from the process of cleaning itself. But then sometimes I actually end up using these long lost items, and that's the story of how I rediscovered my coffee maker.
That's awesome. That definitely gives me more incentive to clean my room now. In all seriousness, I do feel like as life changes, certain items lose value and then gain it back again. Like that old tennis racket that I may use on an odd sunny day. It can be difficult to know where life is going to take us, and sometimes those items we hold on to eventually do become clutter. I'm really good at convincing myself that the purchases I've made are useful regardless of whether they are or not. What about you?
I think I'm guilty of that here and there too, actually. But if I'm feeling the need to convince myself, it probably is because I've just purchased something that I want as opposed to something that I need, which is fine too, I think, as long as I'm able to distinguish between what a necessity is and what a luxury is. I think hoarding becomes a problem when you hold on to things that you don't need, but you think you do because they give you some sort of comfort. And then there's obviously some things that are more difficult to get rid of. For me, that's clothing and shoes. I'll try to stick to a 3-month rule. If I haven't worn it in that long, I probably won't again. But then there's that tiny little voice that says, what if you need it later?
Yeah, I am definitely buying too many clothes. But clothes shrink or go out of fashion, right? Or your family borrows them. Sometimes it's easier to just go out and buy new clothes instead of repairing or retrieving the old ones. For me, hoarding is definitely a gray area, and it is depending on each individual. So how do we really know we're making the right decision to throw it away or keep it?
That's a really good question. There's some food for thought for you. What's your criteria for deciding what stays and what goes? Do you decide based on what the item costs, how useful it is, or whether you have emotional attachment to it? Let us know on Facebook or Twitter.